All right. Hi, Mark. Good to see you
Good to
here.
see you, Peter. Yeah, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you. I know you've been traveling a lot. I'm looking forward to seeing you in LA tomorrow. Who do we have on today's episode?
We have Roy Knickman. Roy was a childhood idol of mine in a sense. He's not that much older than I am, but when I was a kid, Roy was the best of the best. He rode for the Levi's team. He rode for La Vie Claire. I mean, he was many time national champion. Just like an incredible bike rider and a great human being. And I know that you know him pretty well from the Los Angeles scene.
Yeah, so I'm excited for this discussion. Of course, like you, I raced bikes as a junior. I'm about the same age as Roy. Roy was from Ventura. I grew up in San Diego. So we both raced juniors, and I raced against Roy a lot when I was like a senior in high school. And I would say against is sort of doing a lot of work. In fact, Roy would like lap the field solo, and I was very much like pack fodder. But so I knew him a little bit back then and reconnected with him when he had the Lux team here in LA. And I'm very excited to speak with him today about the new team that he's launching.
Yeah, I think the team is going to be amazing. We both had some insights on what's going to go on there, and they're really planning something special and unique. And they're trying to address some of the reasons that junior cycling isn't really a thing. It's not really visible in the world. In Europe, it's bigger than it is here. But I think that the people that Roy is connected to are really going to blow this out of the water and make this. They're going to make a junior team that's on the level of a world tour team.
Amazing. I can't wait for this. Okay, so here we go. Roy Knickman. Okay, Roy Knickman, good to see you.
Good to see you again, too.
Hey, Roy.
Okay, Roy, I think you're in Redlands, California right now. Are you there at the Redlands Classic?
I'm actually taking a break at my sister's in Palos Verdes before I head over to Redlands. So it's pretty rough over here. Spent a little bit out by the jacuzzi, and after some Wisconsin time, this is a nice place to be.
That's great. Roy, you and I have sort of a kind of in a way a long history together in that we raced against each other as juniors. You probably don't remember me because I was pack fodder and you were solo off the front, but I certainly knew who you were. And then we reconnected during your days with Lux Cycling. And we just want to cover today some of your own life story and then what you have going on right now. Mark, what do you think?
Yeah, same. I can remember being a kid. We're all basically the same age. Roy was just such an amazing rider, was on the cover of magazines and winning all kinds of races and national championships and riding for Raleigh and La Vie Claire, just like the best teams in the world. So it was really, I have great memories of that time. And I always thought of Roy as like, one of the best.
Yeah. And, Roy, Mark brought it up. Let's start with like when you were in high school, when I was racing against you. I think you were on the North Hollywood Wheelmen. Is that right? And you were wearing a hairnet helmet. I was on the skid lid team. We had an early hard shell helmet, which was pretty innovative at the time. Tell me about those early years. How did you get into bike racing?
Oh man, it's an interesting story. I came out to California when I was 11 years old, and I got a BMX bike in Ventura, California. I hung out at a bike shop that had a Vietnam vet who was a frame builder, and this hippie, Mike Compton, remember his name, who didn't own a car. He had like 30 bicycles. And they always said to me, they saw I was the serious kid, and they're like, oh, what are you going to look like when you have a growth spurt? You're going to be like a gorilla on a tricycle. So they encouraged me to get a 10 speed. And when the the summer when I was 14 years old, my BMX bike got stolen and I had to make a choice and save some money. And I just got a 10-speed. And there was a community that, you know, took me out on bike rides. My parents knew nothing about it. And I did the local time trial series in tennis shoes, 10-mile time trial series, and went from doing like a 27-minute time trial to like 23 and a half minutes, you know, 10-mile time trial. And they're like, oh, wow, you know, hey, we've got this bike, the shop loaner bike with Campagnolo on it. We want to loan it to you. And it just took off from there. Yeah, I had people in the community taking me to bike races. I got recognized. There was a scout from USA Cycling. We're like pretty much the only scout, happened to be in LA. And I got invited to an all-comers camp when I was 15 years old. And I tested really well on their ergometer. And then they made us all do cyclocross nationals because they needed to fill it out, but it was super dry. And I got like eighth, I think I got seventh place in the elite men's cyclocross. But it was a dry course. And I was a BMXer who also rode motorcycles. So it worked for me. But that was it. I left that camp and they told North Hollywood Wheelman that they were going to take me as a rider and help me out. And they gave the regional, that scouting coach was my coach. And, you know, I progressed from there. And at the end of that season, I was invited to live at the Olympic Training Center you know, I just turned 16 years old. And that was it. Moved away and, man, life was full gas cycling.
Nice. Well, one of the things that you mentioned that I think is interesting to talk about is that you had this community in the North Hollywood Wheelman and the local shop, and that community helped you learn about cycling, get to races. They put on local events that you could train in. It seems to me like that's kind of disappeared in a way. I mean, I had the same experience at Dayton, Ohio. They had a great club, all those things that really helped me discover bike racing because my parents knew nothing about it. And it just seems like now it's much more difficult for kids to kind of find their way into the sport.
You know, what's interesting for me, you know, I stepped away for 3 years and I'm just coming back in, and that's part of this podcast. What I'm seeing this year, having returned after a little bit of a break, you know, from all things cycling, is that there is a little bit of a resurgence of the local clubs really doing a good job, really, really good job of teaching kids the basics of riding. There are a number of organizations that are out there now, like Boulder Racing Club, I think it is, led by Peter Weber. I mean, they have a couple hundred kids that they really teach and expand, with their goal being not just producing bike racers. It's actually far from that. It's creating lifelong members of the cycling community. Which sometimes goes at odds with the development pathway that needs to be accelerated in this day and age, but still a wonderful thing.
And Roy, just to pick up where you left off, you ended up going to Europe, racing in the Olympics. Like, just give us the short version of your pro career. What happened after those junior years?
Yeah, after the junior years, my first year as a senior, I made the Olympic team and rode the team time trial with people who were my mentors that I looked up to: Davis Finney, Ron Kiefel, Andy Weaver. We got a bronze medal. That was really cool. I was recruited by the number one team in the world at the time, you know, at least that was my view, in Lobby Claire, with Greg LeMond and Bernard Hinault. I said no the first year, and they came back a second year. and I had to say yes. Raced 2 years there, and then went over to 7-Eleven when that team was going away, and did 3 years on 7-Eleven, but I got a bit burned out, so I came back to the U.S. and just did some domestic racing after that. Retired from it, worked as the junior national team coach, and then men's national team coach, leading into the 96 Olympics. And left that, went into team management with a little bit of racing, and then became a firefighter. So
nice. Can I ask some good questions about La Vie Claire? Because my memory, like being in high school at that age and just reading all the magazines, they were so innovative and well-funded, and it just seemed like a different level of team than existed at that time. What was your experience, and what do you really remember from racing with giants like Lamond and Eno?
Yeah, it was, my eyes were so big. I'm an interesting cycling case in that I didn't grow up watching the Tour de France or dreaming of being a professional cyclist. I was a horrible athlete. I had really bad hand-to-eye coordination. Like, I never played even a single pickup game of any ball game in middle school or junior high or high school. So, but I was good at bike riding. And durable and strong and determined and serious, and it all worked. So for me, in a way, I was an accidental professional. I got invited to the Olympic Training Center, and my first day, my roommate, and I remember his name was Steve Manthe, from Wisconsin, and on the wall there was a picture of, I think it was Mosier, Cerrone, and Bernard Hinault sprinting at the World Championships. And I remember it because Cerrone was sprinting on his tops, which I didn't understand. But I'm like, hey, who are those guys? And my roommate looks at me like I'm crazy. It's like, So, yeah, for me, it was just this amazing experience, almost, surreal. And yeah, they did everything right. And I was really fortunate. It was a clean team. Paul Koshley, he was like, hey, we take a multivitamin powder. That's what we do. that was our whole medical program. And it was all about nutrition and recovery and, the timing of eating and good training. And that was that. So that was my experience. It was pretty amazing.
That's such a great story. And Roy, just to fast forward, you were a firefighter, you had a family and kids, and in the late 90s and early 2000s, which is when I reconnected with you here in LA, you had an incredibly successful junior team called Lux. Tell us about that team and what was it built on? You had multiple world champions, and I still know some of those kids that I met at one of your training camps.
Yeah, Lux was me getting back into the team situation was interesting because I was coaching. So I started a little coaching business when I was going to Fire Academy, and I needed to make some money on the side. So I was basically full-time going to school and testing at different fire departments. One of the kids I was coaching said, hey, we have this team, and it was based out of Synergy Cycles in Santa Monica, and it was the Get Kraken team, and we need a manager. Could you do this? And I'm like, okay, I could use the money. So for 2 years, I helped that team, and it had a few juniors and some U23s, and went to some races, and the team went away. And at that point, this organization that had this team called Lux asked if I would be involved. They wanted to develop professionals. They knew nothing about what they were doing. And they asked if I could bring any of the extra equipment from the other team. And that's really how it started. I was invited to help. And after a year of working with it, I saw how ineffective the system was. I saw that, grassroots is great, but if your mission is to develop professionals, you've got to go past grassroots. Going to 7 bike races a year is not going to make a professional. And I basically took over the team, laid out how I thought it should be done. It was agreed by the people who were the board. And, we just worked at getting more and more funding. And, I took my vision of what was necessary and took it past grassroots. We did start getting kids from NICA. It was a SoCal team. And our first out-of-state rider was Brandon McNulty. And, of course, he wanted to go to the super prominent team that was out there. And I saw his results I saw him ride at nationals, just how he rode and what he did. And I'd seen him at Valley of the Sun. He's a Phoenix kid. And I'm like, man, you're it. You're going to be the best kid next year. I know these other kids, Gage Hecht and these others, have been doing better up to this point, but there's no question. And I had to wait a couple months for the other teams to pass on him. And then he came to our team, and we did our best to support him. But that helped elevate the team and get more attention, a little bit better funding, recruit better riders. And within, 3 years, we had established ourselves with a solid European schedule, which is what's needed. We generally recruited differently than the other teams, than Toby at Hot Tubes. So we rarely competed with each other on athletes. I would rather find the athlete who got 4th place at nationals and had a handful of other great results and look at why they didn't win and see, oh yeah, if we could provide a better race schedule, better tactics, better equipment, if we put all these things together, that kid would have blown everybody out of the water. And so we started doing this where we would just, take riders who didn't have a lot of street cred, results, but man, had shown these brilliant flashes and get them to race as a team and do really well. And, have a slow, methodical development pathway where it's like, hey, you know what? Yeah, you don't have to do it all today. We're going to get you to Europe before the national team does. And, and then we had discussions with the national team, and it's like, hey, I want to build the best schedule. We need to get, kids can race 90 days in the EU. There's a limit on that, but it's like, hey, between what USA Cycling is doing and what we're doing, we want to get that, use 89 or 90 of those days, because that is where the impact is. That's where the learning is. That's where the level of racing is. And that's where the riders could be seen by the scouts. So, that was basically the formula.
Yeah. You mentioned Brandon McNulty, who's on UAE now and is just, one of the best riders in the world. Who else did you have the opportunity to coach that people might know about?
Yeah. And, the riders that came through the team, and I never specifically coached as far as build training. I'm a mentor. I'm a tactician. I'm a philosopher. But I can, when I say, hey, believe me, you're going to have bad days, or tactically you're going to make mistakes, or, hey, you should do this, that, and another thing. I say it from experience. I say I did it and it worked, or I did it and it didn't work. And they know it's for real. They're not being told something from a book by someone who didn't do it. So that's been very helpful. But back to your question, yeah, the riders, it's McNulty. It was, or is Kevin Vermark, who's now on UAE, Sean Quinn, who is with EF, Colby Simmons with EF, Quinn Simmons with Trek, Riley Sheehan, Luke Lamperti, and there are still some, with Modern Adventure now. There's, one of the last years was this kid Cole Kessler, who is from Thousand Oaks, who is the 9th man on our 8-man team. He was another one. It was purely a recommendation and, but, a hunch and a belief. And the kid won time trial nationals the next year. He actually won time trial nationals after breaking his collarbone 4 weeks before and getting surgery, getting on a trainer, and then being at the level to win. So yeah, we have a good number of riders who we did our little part in bringing them up the ladder.
Roy, one of the things I was really struck by when I spent a few days with you at your camp, I think it was like right before the pandemic, early 2020, was your philosophy, like, which I interpreted as, hey, we're here to make better people. And if they win some races, great, but that's not actually the goal. That really like knocked me out. I was so impressed by that. And by some of your riders like Megan Jastrab, like really had an impact on me, how mature and thoughtful she was as a person, let alone junior world champion, now on UAE. Tell me about your sort of like coaching philosophy as it relates to kids.
Well, it's, first of all, I start as a father. And so the satisfaction in this, I named whatever 10 riders who have elevated and make money racing their bikes and are living their dream. And there's another 70 of them that don't, that I'm equally as excited about and proud of because of, the tools that we give them, So yeah, the philosophy, it's about process. It's about dedication. It's about being a good human being. And it's about balance. I take my history of being trained under an Eastern Bloc philosophy with the Polish coats and living at a training center, basically an old army barracks, and how it wasn't sustainable. And looking at that and saying, okay, we have to integrate sustainability. You have to love what you're doing. Like right now, that's the big thing, to look at. You're not successful if you help someone get to Europe and they hate it, or they're not very friendly. So, that's really important. It's like I wouldn't be involved with teams at the pro level just as part of the machine. To me, that's not inspiring. It's cool, but it's not inspiring. But when I can talk to a rider, or I'm recruiting a rider who's going to do the peace race, the junior peace race, as like his first European race, which is like insane. And I was on the plane flying into LA today, and I'm like, I want to just write this kid something to remind him that he's a super talented individual, that I've looked at his numbers and his watts to kilograms are great, and he's super tough. And there is no reason, if he just follows some basic rules, that he can't be in the mix. Exactly how it ends up, who knows? But it's like, man, I wrote him this like 5-paragraph, motivational, tactical guidance email, and when I landed, it sent, and he was all excited and said, thanks, I'm super nervous, but this is helpful. So for me, that type of thing is, that's where it's at, that someone can believe in themselves a little bit more, because not everybody has that supportive environment. But when you get that, I mean, it makes a world of difference. So, that's, yeah, building the human being and helping them believe in themselves and understand being how it is to be a good person, is more important than whether they win a bike race, personally.
Yeah. It sounds like everything that you've been working on is leading to something bigger, and that you have a new project that's kicking off. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that new project, because I'm sure that it's something people are going to be hearing a lot about, just knowing the folks that are involved.
Yeah, there is a new project. Let's see, where are we at right now? I guess it's about 2 months ago. There's somebody on this podcast who actually sent me a message, Peter. Guilty, saying, "Hey, there's somebody who's interested in starting a team and wanted to talk to you." And I was in pretty dark place. My mom had just passed away and been going through a lot. I'm like, almost said no, and then I'm like, oh, okay, I'll hear this out. But it can't be another one of these struggle buses. I worked so hard for so many years, struggling with Lux, trying to every year have enough. I was always the Field of Dreams guy. It's like, we have to do X amount to be effective. So I've got to figure out how to build around it to make sure we can do that. But yeah, 2 months ago, got a message. A day later, had a phone call. And totally seeing eye to eye, with the individual driving this. And I can say, because, this will be announced after the podcast. So Eric Min, who like both of you, raced as a junior, a few years, he was a few years older than him. Went to the Olympic Training Center, went and raced in Canada at Labitibi, and is at a place in life where he's like, hey, I wanted to do this for a while, and I just decided now is the time, and it's building great human beings, but also having this crazy goal. It's like that we want to have this multi-year, this 10-year project, and at the end of 10 years, have somebody who's capable of winning the Tour de France, And so, yeah, it's super exciting. And, for me, it was like one day it was phone call. The next day we're talking again. The next day I have plane tickets to go to Valley of the Sun to scout and talk to all the feeder teams where we'll get a lot of the riders from. A day later, he's like, okay, you've got to go to Mallorca and meet all these people. And I have plane tickets to Mallorca. I now have plane tickets to go to the Women's Tour de France, Yeah, it's really exciting to have time to build this out and do it right. Because having staff, having people around that are living the ethos, in it for the kids, all of the aspects that how we want to do this is really, really important. And there were times in my past program where I didn't have the time to really find everybody, the perfect person. And now I'm working on that and feeling really good at the progress we've made in 2 months to put this together, and just insanely excited about all the partners, from Canyon Bikes, and, having an owner of it behind, and Rowan Arnold, having affiliations with World Tour teams, doing this for junior men, but also junior women, making it North American. We'll reach out and there'll be a Canadian element to it. And maybe even at some point, riders from Mexico, and really even looking in different places. We have plans to do a Junior Zwift Academy, and it's it's an interesting thing too, because some people have been like, oh, Zwift Academy, you know, you have riders that don't have a lot of skills, but what does every junior rider have in common? They start with no skills. So if we find some super aerobic physical individual, hey man, we're teaching everybody how to race bikes at a higher level, you know. So it's not like trying to teach a 32-year-old or a 34-year-old to do something when they're programmed. Yeah, a lot of excitement. You know, we're looking at gravel riders who may not have the road results, but it's like, man, you guys have the capacity and the durability and these power surges and, you know, could do phenomenal, you know, riding, mountain biking, road. My only disappointment is now that I've been doing, you know, a month and a half of scouting, is that we can't have two of these teams because there are so many talented young riders. It's like, I could build a team right now without looking super deeply, and it would be successful. And I know riders will be able to move up onto, you know, high quality U23 teams. But I'm still digging, and I'm, you know, and looking deeper at files and different, you know, types of racing. And now I'm like, oh man, this is going to be hard to say no because there's so many great kids out there. So yeah, we got to get some other people on board to do another one of these teams.
One of the things that's really boomed in the last few years, and you know this, is the NICA High School Mountain Bike Racing League, which has over 30,000 kids in high school leagues racing bikes around the United States. Okay, mountain bikes, not road bikes, but a lot of your former like Lux riders, you know, Quinn Simmons, Kevin Vermark, they started out riding mountain bikes. And I'm wondering, are you looking now at any of those mountain bike racing kids?
Oh yeah, we are. You know, for me, it's an interesting formula. And I spoke to I forget her last name, but Amanda
Carey. She's been on the pod with us. Yes.
Okay.
She runs NICA. Yes.
You know, and we're trying to, you know, brainstorming, trying to figure out, you know, it's hard for me if there's 30,000 kids. How do I distill it so that, you know, and even if there's 6 regionals, to get to 6 regionals and distill that is challenging. So it's, you know, I work a lot with scouts, and, you know, my first step back into this was to meet, and at the beginning of the podcast, I mentioned how impressed I was because there are new organizations that didn't exist, at least on any type of national radar, who are having some very well trained and taught young riders come out of them. So, you know, I'm still trying to figure out in the mountain bike world and relationally where there can be synergy and I can help. Yeah, I'm going to look at the different UCI, you know, cross country events that the riders are going to now. There actually a number of kids who were in the younger age category have come out of 13, 14s. A few of the top kids this year who would be 15-year-old racing age have chosen to go mountain bike because they can get some support for that. And there's, you know, 6 big national events they can train for. So I'm having to kind of filter through that too. Do my best, but yeah, we're looking at a lot of different places, and really all of a sudden the team is too small. It'll be too small at 10 male riders and maybe 10 female, with all of the places that we can find really strong, motivated, you know, athletes, good human beings.
And when you think about the composition of the team, we mainly focus on performance, but what have you learned over time about creating the right atmosphere in the team and maybe somebody doesn't have the biggest numbers, but you can tell they would be socially like a good fit, or they would build the environment on the team. How do you account for those kinds of things?
Yeah, it's, the selection of the team it's a bit of an art and a little bit of a gamble. If I can get a rider, like I was friends with Jimmy Riccatello, and I saw Matthew Riccatello at San Dimas. And, of course, he flew up the San Dimas Hill, in the 15, 16 juniors. And I'm like, oh, man, Jimmy, it'd be great to have your son on the team. Now, I didn't realize he was still like 14 years old. So like, oh, great, I got to create a 15, 16 team. But like, so having an athlete whose father was a professional athlete, and Matthew Riccatello's dad was one of the best Olympic distance triathletes in the world. And super good guy, super disciplined, also super, humble. So I bring someone like that onto the team. Riley Sheehan was on the team, and Clark, it's like osmosis. These kids have learned disciplined, had learned work ethic, have learned how to present themselves just through the existence of being in the presence of their parents. But there's that, and yeah, there's kids are going to be a little bit of a challenge. But should they be excluded because they're not easy? No. And some of them come from some hard family situations. So, it's a mix. What's interesting is in this time, it's like we are looking at power files for the athletes, even though that won't be the complete determining factor at all. I never once, through, I think it was 8 years at Lux, ever looked at a power file to determine who should be on the team. Not once. But if a kid is smashing it in a time trial, you know what? And it's like, okay, his power per aerodynamics is really good. And if the kid says, yeah, I did 350 watts last year at nationals, okay, yeah, you got second place. That makes perfect sense. Or you climb really well, and I can see how much you weigh. Your watts per kilogram are pretty good. So I don't need, and I think that can be a little bit of a problem at times because of the inaccuracy of power meters and calibration and whatnot. One person's 320 could be someone else's 350 and it's the same exact number, so, buyer beware if you're selecting a rider based on, what a power meter is saying.
Hey, Roy, one of the things that you made clear to me a few years ago when we were together is how important it was to get kids over to Europe, because there just are not that many races in the United States. There's like one junior race a month and they're spread out all over the country. Whereas like if you're in Belgium during the summer, there's a junior stage race. There are 4 of them every weekend within a 2-hour drive. Like, do you still feel like it's necessary to get the kids over to Europe?
Oh, it's more necessary now than it was 5 years ago. We used to be able to, and here's the problem. Yeah, there's 8 junior races around the country, but the level of those races, it's not the same. Like we would do the Redlands Pro 1 race and have guys who are capable of podium, being on the podium, getting in jerseys, Sunset Hills race, which was the hardest race at the end. I'm like 3 guys in the front, 3 juniors in the front group. I mean, I had trouble even finishing that after I did my teamwork as a pro. And now there's so few races that even to ride the riders, I don't even have enough elite races to try to ride them up in. Because riding Redlands, that speed, it's similar to a junior UCI 2.1, maybe not even a Nations Cup. It's, like we went and smashed at Redlands one year with Quinn and Luke and a few others. and then Michael Garrison. And they went over to Europe and they didn't do as well initially. So it was like, wow, okay. That's the level of it. So yeah, it takes a lot of time, and it takes, whether you're flying around the country with the team, which is a lot of money, or flying to Europe and setting up a base and having to bounce from country to country and have vehicles and staff, and it's a big commitment, and frankly, parents, they can buy into a program that says, hey, for $4,000 we can do this for 2 weeks, man, but 2 weeks isn't enough. It's got to be a season, or at least a well-positioned month here, 6 weeks there, 2 weeks here, where there's big exposure to that level of racing. And also back to the sustainability, spending enough time and with the right guidance to figure out, not waiting to go home to the US, but loving to race in Europe and be in Europe and really integrate. So when they do get that U23 opportunity, they can just, they're at home. They're like, okay, I'm going to live in France, or I'm going to live in Belgium, or I'm going to live in Spain, and Europe's cool. I figured it out. It's cool. So,
Okay, couple more questions, Roy. The best young rider in the world right now is Paul Seixas, the Frenchman, who's 19. And I mean, I watched just this morning the Tour of the Basque Country, and he just rode away from an elite pro field. Roglic, Del Toro, like he just dropped all of them like no problem, and he's 19. Have you been following his career?
Man, I've been for 3 years. I was pretty much off in the woods. So no, I have not been following his career until whatever 3 months ago, 2 months ago, maybe 3 months ago, when they started talking about him and saying, okay, wow, there are those generational riders, but it's pretty impressive. Remco is one who, came out of juniors, and I think in his second year, he didn't even race U23s. He got like second in the time trial at, in the elite world championships. And yeah, and yet Paul is like just riding away from everybody at 19 years old, including Remco's and, whoever else. I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see with them, because I believe they're going to ride him in the Tour now.
I'm pretty sure they will. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's been a long time since they've had that, so it's going to be crazy in France.
One question I had, given the way that women's cycling has developed in the last decade, what are your thoughts on having a team with young men and women on the team? And how do you think that it might be different to train, mentor, coach young ladies versus boys?
Well, first of all, I think we tried to do it with Lux. Like we eventually brought women on, even though we didn't really have the money to expand so far. And we had impact, after a couple of years of that junior program with Kaya Schmidt, Michaela McPherson, and Olivia Cummins.
Aubrey Drummond, maybe.
And Aubrey Drummond, we did a mixed team. Aubrey was U23. So we had some juniors and U23s because domestically they were racing elite. And we could even do some stuff that wasn't UCI specific, or actually they were all last year. So you could ride a junior up in the women in, I believe, 2.2 stage races with the pros. In that year, Kaya won a world championship on the track. and was, we got like second, fifth, and 12th or something at Road Worlds, with those 3 riders. So the excitement is in the US or in, I don't know a lot of countries that do it at a high level outside of just like a regional club team. For us to be able to take from North America, from Canada and the US, and put the best 10 riders together so they train together all year, not just, hey, going to Europe for 3 weeks, great. And then they're back on their individual programs. And it's like, hey, I can't go to that many races because I don't have the money. But if we can fully support and get them 45 race days, get them 100 team days together, utilize the Zwift component to have community when they are living in their different parts of the country or North America. I think the impact on the woman's side will be even greater, because there's been a bit of it for the junior men, but there's been nothing for junior women. And, seeing what Zwift has done with, bringing the Tour de France now actually has multiple days, like a tour. And they're promoting women's cycling at the highest level, and now supporting this junior, program. I think it's going to have a huge development. And for me, it's important. Like, I'll be meeting, directors here at Redlands, and, I want to have, it's a junior women's team. It's going to have a junior women's director, junior women's, it's going to have a women's director, support staff. It'd be my dream to find a female mechanic too, and have a female unit, because they will have their own van and trailer, have their own, operations will be the same, but they're going to be, and we'll do training camp and things together, but with separate houses and whatnot. But it's going to have a different touch. There needs to be somebody who can mentor with race experience, life experience. I don't think it's a lot different, but it's going to take a different people to do that. That can be really connect with the athlete. That's really important in the development of an athlete. So that's my mission. I'm working on finding those people.
Amazing. Well, Roy, it's just been so great speaking with you and hearing about the new team. I'm so excited for you, and I can't wait to root for you. I think Mark has a special final question for you.
Okay. Our usual final question is remembering what your first bike was. But what I really wanted to add, and I asked you about this when I saw you in Mallorca, we were talking about old bikes, because I'm just a vintage bike nut. I'd love to know about the bikes you rode for La Vie Claire, like, to the extent that you remember, because those at the time were just the best of the best. Like, the look bikes, or even the steel ones, were really beautiful and kind of cutting edge.
Yeah. The first bike that I remember was a Schwinn. Was a kid in New York. I think it was called an Orange Crate. It had like a smaller front wheel, 20-inch rear wheel, but I think a 16-inch front wheel. I think it had a shifter, like, it was, a 3-speed or 5-speed, but it was like a stick shift. So I remember that. And just had a gold Schwinn Stingray too. I don't know if it was before or after. So that's first bike memories. And then, with La Vie Claire, my first bike, it was actually branded, I believe, Bernard bike. And then we transitioned to the Look Carbon, what was it? The TVT, aluminum lugged, carbon bikes. So that the second year, and that was the beginning of clipless pedals. And we had these ginormous white Look ski bindings, that upside down ski bindings, basically, that we clipped into, before they started to to shape them for cornering clearance, but they didn't really worry about that in Europe at the time. Unlike us U.S. criterium, people who needed every millimeter of clearance to pedal through the corners. So those are my memories.
Love that. And the other thing we talked about a little bit is 84 Olympics, and like around that time, the stuff you did in time trials, a lot of really cutting edge bikes built by Mike Melton and other people that were just still, when I see photos of them, they're just so cool looking.
Yeah. Yeah, it was cool. And, the great part of that is they were developing them in 83 when we went to the Junior World Championships. We got to use all of those bikes, the prototype bikes. I think I had 5 bicycles at the Junior Worlds. I had a road bike, a team time trial bike, a team pursuit bike, that was 24-24. Team time trial was 24 front, 27 rear. A pursuit bike, which was Connie Carpenter's actually, that I got to use. The 27-inch wheels, but upside down bars. And then my points race bike on the track, So I had 5 bicycles that all different wheel sizes, all that crazy stuff. Yeah. So,
we take it for granted now, but in the late 80s, a carbon fiber bike with clipless pedals was like radical, like just unbelievable. So futuristic.
Well, and that's one thing I would like to comment on, like what we raced the Tour de France on in the 80s. It's like now you can buy, you can get something for like $1,800 that's better, It may be Shimano 105 or whatnot, but it's lighter and works better. And it's like, it's great that the technology has passed along, so that the recreational rider can get something that is responsive and lightweight and works really well.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay, well, Roy Knickman, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate having you on, and we're so excited for your new team. And in the show notes and our post podcast discussion, we'll put that the URL and the name of it in the notes so everybody can follow you. Thank you again.
Yeah, thanks, Roy. I really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thank you.
That was awesome, and I'm so rooting for him and this team, and I can't wait for them to get out there and start racing.
I gotta admit, we spent time together in Mallorca, and I was totally dorking out because I'm such a freak about vintage bikes, and I was asking him a million questions about all the bikes he rode, because especially on La Claire, they had the coolest bikes ever. Like, they had some of the first carbon bikes. They had a really incredible equipment. And luckily Roy he actually remembered a lot of that stuff. So it was kind of like a fan moment for me.
Yeah. And he was there at the early phases of tech experimentation in bikes. So, for example, he was a medalist in the Olympics, in the LA 84 Olympics, in the team time trial when that was a road Olympic event. And so
100K.
And they're riding really interesting, crazy bikes. That was the very beginning of like aerodynamic experimentation, and he was right there for that.
Those bikes were built, like I talked to him a bunch about that, because those bikes were built like 2 miles from where I went to high school. Mike Melton was the builder, and we were sponsored by Raleigh at that time, and I would go to see where the bikes were made. And I can't believe that I didn't try and get one of those, because they had the craziest bikes, like 24-inch wheels, 27 and 24. They had the craziest stuff ever.
Right. So interesting. Well, Mark, we're into the freewheeling part of the podcast where we talk about what's on our mind this week. What do you got? What's going on for you? What do you think's interesting?
A couple quick things. One, I saw that Eurobike got moved to September. They moved it around on the calendar. It used to be in September, then they moved it to the spring. They've changed locations, obviously. I think it's something that they have to do, but I don't think it's going to bring the show back. And I would be skeptical if I hadn't gone to Shanghai, but going to Shanghai for that show and seeing how big it was and how many people from Western brands were there. Next year, Shanghai is going to be the big show for sure. So I don't see Eurobike coming back.
And Mark, do you feel like Eurobike is from another era, like that model, which, you know, we used to have Interbike here in Las Vegas, of course, that went away, has more or less been replaced by Sea Otter Classic, which is both brands and consumers, riders, both all in one giant mix. Maybe Shanghai was kind of like that as well. Do you feel like the Eurobike model is like just like a dated kind of?
I'm not entirely sure, because the one thing about Sea Otter that Sea Otter doesn't do a good job of is not many dealers go to Sea Otter. And that's what Interbike was, like a dealer show effectively. And there's some dealer shows around the country, like Cabda still does a show or two. The whole thing seems broken, to be honest, because it just, who wants to go stand in a convention center? Nobody. Like, that's not fun. But if you look at like how Shanghai works, it's kind of everybody. It's dealers, it's consumers, it's brands. It's like, I think there needs to be a couple global events that everybody can agree on. Sea Otter's one. I think Shanghai will be one. Something like Traca in Spain is turning out to be a pretty important event that people go to. So I think it's going to be, I think you're mostly right that that kind of thing is from another era, at least in our industry, but we don't have a clear solution on how people are going to get together.
Yeah, you know, I think about the rise of direct-to-consumer brands and online shopping across everything, you know, not only, of course, Amazon, but Canyon in bikes. I used to go in the 90s to the ASR surf, ski, snowboard show.
To go there.
Also, crazy parties, and all the independent retailers used to go. I feel like that, like just focusing on independent retailers is like, I just don't know if that's a thing anymore, given how the world has moved on. In fact, in bikes, I was listening to a really good episode of Wade Wallace's Escape Collective podcast where he interviewed these bike retailers, and they were talking about how the consumer kind of their behavior has just changed over the pandemic. Like, people have moved to like online purchasing and certainly research of everything. And so the independent dealer, it's still important. It's just, it's the relationship with the customer has kind of changed. And so.
Yeah, it's interesting because it kind of goes in waves. Like, I think bikes are just a weird thing because they're technical. I think there's always going to be dealers, but obviously they're switching more to service and other things as opposed to just relying on being able to sell bikes and especially accessories. And I mean, who's going to go for an inner tube at a store unless you need it right then? You're just going to get it from Amazon or whatever. Like, it's so much easier.
And I think, like, you know, alongside that, like you're mentioning parts and accessories, which I just feel like that business has left bike shops. Like, service is still really important. A lot of sales are important, but a lot of things like parts, like, you know, like just think about tires now, how many tire sizes there are, particularly when you account for just gravel and road, goes anywhere from like 28 to 50 and above in 2 millimeter increments. There's no way that a bike shop can carry all the brands in all the sizes. So if you're like buying new tires, there's no chance you're going to go to a bike shop and even try that. You're just going to go online and find that tire in a 32 or that tire in a 44.
And you're not even mentioning like all the casings. There's like a million different like we work with the tire brand, and the number of SKUs. This is a medium-sized tire brand, and they have 10,000 SKUs.
Oh my, 10,000!
They have so many casings and so many beads and so many sizes. Like, it's completely insane.
That's bonkers. So yeah, it's a different time now. You know, Mark, what I'm thinking about right now is back to bike racing, and there are two things that I've just been paying attention to. Number one is Kate Courtney winning a UCI road race in Europe last week in the Czech Republic, which I just like was not on my bingo card for 2026. You know, I saw her twice in the last 6 months at different events, one that you and I were at together, and I asked her about her schedule for this year. and she was very coy about what her plans were. She wouldn't admit to anything. And now I can see that, like, if you start like connecting the dots, like she won the mountain bike marathon UCI World Championship last year. That's like a 6-hour event or something. Now she's winning road races. I see her kind of like, and you and I were at Sea Otter. She rode the Lifetime Grand Prix gravel race there and was 5th. Like, you can see her kind of moving to longer events, and I could really see her aiming for the LA 28 Olympic road team, which I think, like, if you look at the UCI women from the United States racing road, it's pretty wide open. Like, of course, Kristen Faulkner would be a probable for that team. We'll probably get 2 slots. So I think Kate would have a good shot at making that team. Maybe she needs to get on a World Tour road team next year and race a bunch of road races to get UCI points.
She would need that experience.
Yeah, I do too. But anyway, so I thought that was really interesting. The other thing I was just thinking about along the lines of road racing is just the decline in UCI road races in general, whether it's, in the United States or even in Europe. Like, I had a lot of discussion last year with the Tour of Norway, which was a UCI road race up there. It was 50% of their financial support came from the Norwegian government, which said, yeah, no, we're not going to pay for that this year. And that was it. The race was gone the next day because they can't survive on their own. As you and I have talked about a lot, there's just no business model that supports having certainly a road race. And they're so expensive to run. You have to close hundreds of miles of roads. You need cops. And they're just, particularly at the high level of racing, you don't have a lot of participants to like make entry fees from, versus like a gravel race where you might have like 1,000 or 2,000 people paying a couple $100 a shot. You don't have that in road racing. And so, and I don't see them coming back in the United States. I don't see that lack of a business model changing anytime soon. What do you think?
I agree. And I agree 100%. When I was a kid, or when we were kids, there were so many races everywhere, like criteriums all over the place. You could make decent money as a younger person racing bikes, and now all those are gone. And to be honest, I had dinner with Matthew Vanderpoel's agent and the people who run his team, and they were even saying, even in a place like Belgium and Holland, where bike racing is just like a religion, that the races are going away, like massively. So I think until there's some kind of an economic model that really benefits the promoters, they're just going to go away. Like, we've seen so many races happen for 1 or 2 years. The people putting the races on lose a bunch of money, and they just decide, like, why would I keep doing this? Like, I got to get away from it.
Yeah. And I was thinking about, like, I was talking to some people in Austin today who were sharing photos of them riding on the Circuit of the Americas, a car racing track in Austin. And they start like bike rides there in the fall, which I got to go do. And like, is that where like bicycle road racing is going to go to, like either criteriums, which are more affordable to put on, or like, hey, let's do it on a car racing track where we don't have to close roads? Is that, are they going to like default to that kind of experience?
It could be, but it'd be pretty limited, I would guess. Even around, like in the Bay Area, there's a couple car racing tracks. There's one within an hour of me, but the other one's way down at Laguna Seca that I would never be 2.5 hours. That's
right. And we've raced on Laguna Seca. It's actually a really hard track to ride on, but
it's really hard.
I don't know. It's like, it's sort of like bigger than a criterium, but not exactly a road race. So, anyway, so we'll see what happens. My fingers are crossed. I'm hoping for the best, but I'm not sure. Okay. Well, Mark, that's it for this week. Thanks again for your time, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you. Look forward to seeing you too.